everyone to this first part of our webinar series between Resimplify and Marketing Alliance. This is the Turning Prospects into Projects, the 4 Ps of community growth. So we're so glad to have all of you join us today. And I just want to say over the next few sessions, we're going to be exploring some frameworks that we've created and some practical strategies that both of our companies use for moving early interest to real economic development wins. This series is co-hosted by Resimplify and Marketing Alliance, and we're excited to share how both of our organizations help communities attract investment, connect with site selectors, and drive some real good sustainable growth. So my name is Delilah Mells. I am just going to be introducing these two guys who are going to be leading us today. So let's get started. Here is a quick overview and a quick look at what we'll be discovering today. And we'll start with a quick introduction from our speakers, then move into the heart of the discussion, defining kind of why visibility and positioning are critical for any community success. And then from there, we'll introduce the 4 Ps framework for community growth and then dive deeper into the first stage, which is prospecting and awareness. So hopefully by the end, you'll walk away with some actionable takeaways to start applying in your own outreach and marketing efforts. So before we jump in, let's take a moment to meet our professionals leading today's conversation. Matt and David, if you guys want to just take about a minute or so to introduce yourselves and your roles, that would be great.
Perfect. Yeah. Thank you, Delilah. Really excited to be here with our fine partners over at Marketing Alliance. So quick intro for me. My name is Matthew Francis. I am the head of sales with Resimplify. So we have been in the economic development civic world for 6 years now. I've attended roughly 60 conferences in the economic development space over that time. So really gotten to get a lot of hands-on feedback with folks of what they're doing, how they're driving success, better practices, and really excited to dive into this 4P framework that is applicable in all industries like ours, but also for a lot of our clients in the economic development world. A little about Resimplify, if you've never heard about us before, which hopefully since you're on this webinar, that's not the case. We are a data and technology company revolving around listing data. So a lot of what we do in the economic development world is related to building and site databases or available commercial real estate. Most economic developers are showcasing some of the sites they have to offer and real estate available, right? One of my favorite sayings is no properties, no projects. So we come in and help with that properties piece. We work with EDOs to help manage, maintain, and collect a high quality database that's up to date, accurate, and a good available resource for anyone looking at your website. So happy to dive into some of that later, but I think that's a good starting point, Delilah.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. Great to be partnering with Resimplify and Matt, Delilah, and Vicky and the broader team. A great partner of us at Marketing Alliance. My name is David Petter, and I bring to the table a traditional marketing background. I owned an ad agency in Austin, Texas, right before the internet craze in the late 90s. Ran that for about a decade when I first started workforce development marketing and became really fulfilled in my work again. I was able to be strategic and creative and help someone find a better quality of life through a job. So I kind of jumped in headfirst into economic development marketing in Lubbock, Texas, for about 3.5 years, and I decided to try running an economic development organization myself. So I went from a marketer to an EDO president, ran a few economic development groups in the state of Florida, and then was recruited to work in just north of Washington, D.C. in Montgomery County, Maryland, to grow their economic development organization from 3 people to 22 people and manage about a $5 million budget in what was a pretty challenging place to do business. I like to joke that's where I lost my hair, but I actually lost it years before. After that stint, I started consulting and then joined Marketing Alliance as the president. I ended up buying the company a few years ago. And it's a great opportunity for me to combine both traditional marketing expertise and knowing the shoes that some of the participants on this call, some of the audience on this call, the shoes that you wear, to create solutions that are not only strong marketing wise, but relevant to what economic developers really need. So I'll segue into our company real quick. From a company standpoint, we've been in business going on 25 years this June, working in 29 states for 465 communities. And any day we talk to probably 8 to 10 different communities every month, probably 30 to 40 communities. Like Matt and Delilah, Vicky, and the broader group at Resimplify, every single day we're solving problems for economic development clients. And I think that's why today's conversation will be one of authority and of validity. We're not doing this for the first time, but we're really honing our opinion and perspective based on the best practices that our combined client group, which is in the multiple of hundreds of communities across the United States. So I'm real excited to partner with Matt today on the first of four of these seminars to share a little bit of what we do and how we might be able to improve your community.
Yes, thank you, Matt and David, for introducing yourselves and your prospective companies. I really appreciate it. So, to get us started here, we want to, ask why are we even here, right? So, at its core, community growth happens when, the right audience finds the right opportunities at the right time. And that's where our partnership between Resimplify and Marketing Alliance comes in. And we work together to help organizations build that kind of digital visibility that attracts investors, site selectors, and potential business prospects. So today's session is primarily focused on the first stage of that process, the beginning of the 4Ps, which is prospecting and awareness. So we're going to look at, how can communities create that vital first impression, spark attention, and start building some relationships that lead to real projects. And one thing I do want to mention is that if anyone has any questions, you can put them in the chat, and we will either most likely handle them at the end during a Q&A portion, or if they come up and it's relevant to what these two gentlemen are talking about at the time, then we will handle the questions as we go, if that sounds good. Okay, so starting with our 4Ps, let's take a look at kind of the big picture of this series, turning prospects into projects, like David and Matthew have said. This is a four-part joint webinar series, and this is built kind of around a reimagined version of the marketing 4Ps: person, product, place, and promotion. And this is kind of tailored to the economic development perspective, our version of the 4Ps is. So our framework kind of moves through these four stages: prospect to product to promotion and then project. So each session will explore kind of one of these phases, kind of showing how data, design, and strategy work together and then turn opportunities into a measurable result. So to go forward, we can start here. If Matthew, you want to take it away.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. And this is going to be one of the most important stages of this whole process. Obviously, it's the first and the initial, but of all things, you've got to get people interested in you. And the easiest way to get folks interested in you is awareness. So, are you visible? Are you findable? I know with my team, we look at, I don't even want to know how many economic development websites over the years, thousands. And there's obvious differences across the board when we look at economic development websites, and even just trying to discover economic development groups. And naturally, you could say, my team is a team of experts at that specific field. And so really want to dive into some of the ways that you guys can stick out and really help get people interested in you, make them aware of you and be able to find you. But then more importantly, obviously, as this lead funnel shows, converting them into actions. So beginning of the process, but certainly an important one. David, you have any thoughts here?
Yeah, I think I'm going to use this in context, the awareness context in talking about a website, which I think is the universe that we operate best in between Marketing Alliance and Resimplify. There's certainly a lot of ways to identify prospects and pursue prospects, but I think for the sake of the 4Ps seminar series, we're talking specific to uh, website storytelling, the emotional side, the data side, and then the product being the real estate side. So, whenever I talk about marketing or advertising, it sometimes come across as just so no-brainer. But as Matt, you alluded to, you have to be known, you have to be seen, you have to just exist. Someone has to be able to find you. I think that you first have to be known and then you have to be liked, right? Someone has to like you. They want to have to do business with you. They have to like you. They want to trust you. Like you got to kind of just get those basic caveman things out of the way first. Like, are you findable? Are you likable? And can we trust each other enough to have a conversation? That's just like caveman, or they call lizard brain or alligator brain. And then as we get into, and if you want to show the next slide, Delilah, as we get into the tactic of a homepage, then once you have that ability to be seen, to be liked, and be trusted, then you have to think about what is going to be the user experience. And economic development is very different than traditional marketing and advertising that you can just, traditional marketing, advertising, you can just shoot a shotgun and you're probably going to hit someone with your message. But economic development marketing is very surgical and very intentional. You're going to have on a website, you're going to have existing business coming on your site. You're going to have someone who wants to work in your community for the first time coming on on your website. You're going to have a new business that's looking for a location, looking at your website. You might have a site selector. You might have a trailing spouse, someone that's going to be joining someone that's coming to your community. You might have a board member that wants to see your metrics and your results. I can go on and on. You have a lot of audiences, what I'd call prospects, that need to be led through the journey of your website. I'm going to stay on this slide for just a minute. We will have another slide that'll show even more depth of your website. But at Marketing Alliance, what we like to do on the homepage, thinking about those different type of audiences, is how do we tell the entire story of a community on just the homepage experience? So from scrolling to top to bottom, would that prospect, whether it's new business, existing business, talent, an entrepreneur, board member, talent, would they understand what the value proposition is of your place? The value proposition being like who you are, what makes you unique, what makes you competitive, what makes you stand out. As probably most people on this call realize, all of us in this industry are basically saying the same thing. We have a strategic location, got a low-cost skilled workforce, we're pro-business, wonderful quality of life, and we want to work with you, right? So how do we actually dive deeper and set ourselves apart when everybody's talking about those general categories? So on a homepage, and this is a pretty clunky looking graphic, but this is what we use called a wireframe. This begins to give our clients the confidence that in one page, we're going to be able to engage with that prospect. So the very first part of the page is going to be this beautiful looping header, typically either still images or moving images that's going to grab someone emotionally. That looping header is going to have smiling, happy workers, wonderful quality of life shots, infrastructure, education partners, business leaders, all the things that we want to immediately kind of touch that heart. I always say, and Jack on the call, I know is tired of hearing me say this, but I say we touch their heart and then we reach for their wallet, right? So we're touching their heart emotionally through the design and the video of the top of the page. And then what we like to do, and there's not a secret formula to this, I think our peers in the industry do it a little bit different, but we like to immediately let the viewer, the prospect know where the heck we are. How many Washington counties, Jefferson counties are there in the United States? I think it's over 30. So we can't just have our name in the domain and hope that someone knows who we are and where we are. So we'll typically do an orientation right at the beginning of the website so that prospect knows exactly where we are in the United States and through some narrative what makes us different and better. We have some hard-hitting infographics, again, make it really easy. And another point here is that prospects digest information differently. Some want that emotional feel. Some want the infographics and the data. Some want the maps. Some want the words. You'll notice on our homepages that we allow someone to engage however they feel comfortable. So that prospect could be a young person, it could be an older person, it could be different education levels, could be from different parts of the world. So the homepage, as you can see it kind of beginning to unfold, allows someone to engage with you in different compelling ways. Finishing out the page and not spending too much time on the homepage will highlight industries. Maybe that's most interesting to someone, or who they are. If they're a first-time business or a site selector, they're going to want to click on that locate a business tab, or they're going to want to expand their business if they're a local business, or it's an entrepreneur and innovator that wants to start a business. So I look at this and I see about 16 welcome mats, right? Kind of like a house that's got 16 welcome mats. And depending on how we want them to get in the door, we have the right way or we have an option for them to come in. You can read, I won't hold up this whole presentation with every single module, but you could read the balance of the information. And really what we're trying to do is make that emotional connection on the homepage, getting that liking, that trusting, that good feeling, that alignment, and then give some really good data that's packaged in a way that that prospect wants to digest it. So with that, well, I'll show the next one, and then I'm going to pass it back to Matt. So this is a little bit of a further build out of the site in addition to the homepage modules you saw on the previous page. This is a little secret sauce. This is a little bit of what I think from implementing best practices with our partners is the correct order of information. If we were to think that the most important information should start left and move right, I want that left navigation tab to again do the whole story. I know we told the whole story on the homepage, but that left tab should be your hardest hitting, most compelling narrative and information and your competitive advantages. We're going to dive deeper into your location. We're going to talk about your workforce and education. We're going to have some data. We're going to have your site and buildings database, which Matt's going to talk a lot about today and in future seminars, and then quality of life. You'll see as you go left to right, you'll find out more about what are your best, most kick-ass, pardon me, for your best featured sites that you submit to proposals often. You're going to have your database that Matt's going to talk about, your infrastructure, your interactive maps. And then as you go through the rest of the tabs, you'll see other ways to engage depending on the type of business you are, what that EDO does. We have the validation points from those business leaders and the testimonials. You're highlighting prospects' interest by their industry, and then a little bit about the organization itself. I don't know if it's this slide that we talk about it, but really outside the homepage, that sites and buildings tab is the next most clicked tab. And that featured sites and buildings pages are number one, two, or three because people ideally they're sold on that homepage, that emotional experience. They know enough, they feel like you got a point of difference. Now they want to start seeing product. And I know product is our fourth seminar, but it should be known that if we're great at prospecting at this stage, we're already getting them interested in that final product.
Yeah, David. What I really like there that you kind of talk about is you're gonna have a variety of folks. You have folks who know your community and are already there who want to expand, but you also have folks who are trying to come. And so making it simple, easy, and intuitive for directing folks to the right place that they want to go, I think is really interesting and key. Having those kind of quick emotional attachments easy on is a good win. And I think the other thing you want to start off with is you want to start off with good wins. When you immediately click to a website like Citrus County, it looks good, it looks simple, and I know I can immediately start to dive in and probably find the tab I want very quickly. One of the things I always like to talk about for when it comes to how we build our products, and I would think websites and certain things are in a similar sense, is I think back to the show, Are You Smarter Than a Fifth Grader? And I always try to say, if a fifth grader can't navigate this, if they can't understand this, or even our platform, so to speak, it's too complicated. And so, nothing complicated started simple and got better over time. And so I think starting simple, easy, intuitive, as you guys have done and with this wireframe is you have to help the customer sometimes and the prospect find the right path forward.
Matt, I don't want to put you on the spot. I know we didn't plan for this question, but that made me think, do you have any statistics of how many uh, viewers or prospects that go to the real estate tab, how many of those are existing businesses versus like site selectors or companies from the outside? Because I think a lot of people on this call might think about implementing that real estate solution you have based on their existing businesses versus trying to bring in companies from the outside. You have their existing businesses that are looking to grow or change or evolve. I imagine you see a lot of hits from both sides, both that new prospect and the existing company. Is there any data on that or anything you see?
I don't have exact numbers, but we have been able to track some of the traction on the platform. And you're definitely right. I think there's a little bit more of an emphasis on new businesses and folks looking. So it could be site selectors, could be businesses directly. But then there's certainly, I think it's around a two-thirds split of new businesses versus existing businesses. And existing businesses, sometimes that can be convoluted of it could be also an existing business in a neighboring market. So one of the first things I think of is in that instance, retail. So, maybe a community store or a mom and pop brand that's starting to open a few stores in neighboring communities from their first location. I think you're seeing a good bit of that, but it's certainly a mix. And I wouldn't forget your existing business and solely focus on recruitment of new businesses as well when you talk about what you put on your website and how to find it.
Awesome. This site, as Matt was talking about, being Citrus County, we launched this, I think, on Tuesday morning of this week. So this site's about 2 days, not battle tested. It certainly went through quality assurance on our side, but I know Delilah will send links after this call for you guys to take a look and see how the functionality goes. I know we probably don't want to go too far into seminar 2, 3, and 4, but I think what's great about it is that it's that visual, that emotional, that human feel, but also the technical strength of the product is really wonderful, man. I don't know if it's time even to talk a little bit about what the property viewer does. Is that something we talk about today, or is that down the road?
I think you start to dive into it. And Delilah, if you want to maybe move forward, just a quick slide. As we walk through the 4P framework again, prospect, product, promotion, and project. Did I say product? 4Ps, confusing, right? Um, once you get them as a prospect, now you kind of got to get them interested in what you have. And one of the biggest things around a lot of the projects that we see in the economic development world is, I said it earlier, no properties, no project. So gatekeeping information in the 21st century, when you think of on top of SEO, GEO, all the ChatGPT, Perplexity, Gemini, things like this, having accessible information is key because a lot of these tools are going to pull from accessible information. So the thought of saying, "Hey, give me a call and, I'll tell you of everything we have," is I think a little bit outdated. And so once you get them to your front door, now you got to start giving them a glimpse of the product. Of course, you're not going to answer every single question anyone has on a website, but you brought them there. Now you've got to have accurate quality information to keep them and get them interested in that kind of, discovery call to see if they're a good fit for your community or potentially the type of industry you're looking to recruit. So, yeah, I mean, having reliability of data is an easy way to emphasize that one, you're proactive in doing things right. There's oftentimes, I remember 2 years ago, we heard a story of a now client who, prior to using us, was maintaining a database on their own, and they actually they had prospects fly out from coast to coast to do a couple site tours. And one of the four properties that they showed or were going to show was actually sold. So they'd been sending information to the client on a potential industrial site. And next thing you know, during their tour, they actually had to cancel because they found out a day prior that, the property was no longer available. So when you talk about getting interest, making a simple, easy mistake like that can cost you a lot. They talked about egg on their face. They did not win the project at the end of the day. And so things like that, you really got to capitalize once you start to get that glimpse of a real prospect.
I think this might still be you, Matt, but you covered a lot of this topic in your last slide.
Yeah, I think I like, action is, right? Action is the goal with anything. So what's the next action you're going to take is I think a lot of things that people should start thinking about. A lot of these folks have done wonderful jobs with marketing campaigns and driving that awareness. Now it's time to start getting some action. Um, what is one of the best steps that y'all take when it comes to websites and a lot of the marketing that you do to turn that awareness into action?
Yeah, I think we do it on everything that we do, and that's kind of been a shift in our company since I joined it, having that economic development experience. And I've seen other, mostly advertising firms, not necessarily economic development marketing firms. I think they understand, but a traditional ad agency or a videographer or a tactical company will typically produce the work kind of in a vacuum, not really having a result in mind or an agreed upon goal with the client. So everything that we do, especially with websites, is understand from the beginning what is the intention, what does success look like if we're good at what we do from that prospect all the way to the real estate product and the project. So um, unless you know kind of what the end result is, then you just kind of you're just branding or you're putting out fluff. And then we've come behind a few ad agencies kind of resurrect a better campaign that really went nowhere because there wasn't any type of objective defined. So I think, on the website side, and you said it when you talked about the two-third, one-third, typically websites on the prospect side are going to be business recruitment centric. And a lot of spending in economic development marketing is on the business recruitment side, although I think we would all agree that a lot of growth or majority of growth happens from keeping your existing business and helping your existing business and entrepreneurs and economic gardening and all those things that are outside of business recruitment. Business recruitment is sexy and board of directors love it, elected officials love it. So, typically on the prospect side, we're talking about company decision makers and site selectors and people that are going to bring new money into your community. So, if I were in the shoes of some of the people on this call, I would think about, what are the I think there's two type of metrics that a board can hold you accountable to. One is activity, which is great, but then the second one's kind of where the rubber hits the road. So the activity is, number of hits to the website. How long did they stay on the website? When I was in Montgomery County, we were proud that they stayed on our website. We took it from 2 minutes to 2 minutes and 31 seconds. And you could argue like maybe it took them too long to find the information they were looking for, but in reality, we had a lot of really rich video content that was engaging and it kept someone part of our story. So you have those activity metrics of like number of visitors, how long are they on, how many pages are they looking at? Those are things that you can drive through marketing. The results are how many inbound leads did you get by email? How many phone calls did you get? Did someone fill out a form? Did they download a white paper? And then eventually, how many jobs were created? How much capital investment was invested? Those are a little bit harder, obviously to quantify from your marketing and your actions, but I would think you'd want to start any project, whether you engaged Marketing Alliance or Resimplify or any of our peers in the industry with, what does success look like? So 6 months from now, or a year from now, 2 years from now, we're all looking at each other and we said we accomplished what we had hoped to accomplish.
Yeah, and I would also think about, what audience going back to the beginning prospect, who are your right prospects? Do you know who you're trying to recruit? Obviously, is very key. The economic development world is very diverse in what folks are looking for community to community wise. And so really emphasizing, I think one of the things that you guys help people do is find the right audience and build something to attract the right audience. And then where we can come in a little bit more in spaces is, connecting the right audience with the right opportunities. And in our instance, that's real estate, which once again, luckily for us, most businesses need real estate, whether it be an office, a retail store, a warehouse, things of that nature. So, you know, knowing the right prospect solves a lot of problems too, because if you build your website for the wrong audience, to your point, you're going to see that conversion go down. You're going to see a lot less action, and you're probably going to see folks spending less and less time on the website.
Yeah, one thing that we do, and we didn't discuss this in kind of our rehearsal days as far as like Market Alliance abilities, but we have a technology called Site Tracker, as other firms have it named, other things where we can actually see who is on the website based on their company IP, not necessarily the person's name. But not only is that great for being able to turn around and market to that company, knowing that they're on your site, but it also teaches you where people are going on your website and maybe gives you an idea of what industries to promote. We have a community in Colorado that we didn't really think was a data center opportunity community, but they were just getting hit so hard on their data center page that then we turned around and created a second marketing endeavor related to data centers and prospecting those. So there are technologies that this audience can implement to not only launch your site and make it great, but then monitor how your website's being used, what pages are being viewed. You could even do that probably at the Resimplify level of seeing what buildings are being looked at the most. And maybe that would influence what you put in your next RFP back to the state or another partner. So a lot of cool stuff there to kind of do a little espionage on traffic to your website to make the content more relevant and take action to it.
Yeah, yeah, we certainly, yeah, we're actually gonna speak more on this soon as we actually make an announcement. But yeah, activity tracking is what we would call it, and that is something we'll actually have launched within our platform at the end of the quarter, and you're going to be able to see insights into, let's say you went to a conference over the last 2, 3, 4 weeks, month afterwards, what were they clicking on? What were your clicks over time? How many clicks did each property get? How many flyer downloads? Were they it like so data is obviously incredibly value in taking action, honestly, with that data is going to be really key. So whether it be where are they going on your website and how long are they spending, what properties are folks clicking on? One of the ways that we've seen some insight with that is you may not think you're a retail community, or you may not do anything retail, as a lot of economic development orgs don't. But once you start to see some of the numbers on the interest in retail, to your point with data centers, I think you're also going to see a lot of folks starting to better understand who their prospects are, because it does change. And even if you were not a data center community or not a retail community years ago, that doesn't mean you won't be in the future. So, the other thing to me that sticks to is not being stuck with a certain mindset. Always be open to change and evolve, and look at the information and the data that you have to you and make those adjustments, whether it be on your website or elsewhere.
Good. I don't remember what the next slide is, Delilah. There it is. One thing I was just going to say, and it is a little bit related to this slide, is if I could kind of double down on this idea of having a lot of welcome mats in your marketing. I think that's super important on your website, which is related to this particular series, is just offering a lot of ways into the conversation, especially knowing that your website's being used without you participating in that usage. They're looking at your website while you're doing your work during the day or in the evening or on the weekend, but someone is entering your website and going through a user experience without your knowledge, that you almost have to think through what are the possible 20, 30 scenarios. And you meet those people in real life, you'd think, if this entrepreneur came to our website, how would they process our information, or the site selector, or this student that's looking for an internship in the community? Um, I had an opportunity when we were in Montgomery County. We had this, it's relatable, but not relatable. We had this huge innovation ecosystem, and we probably had 25 different partners doing some work in helping entrepreneurs. And I was really like hell bent on creating one way into the process, and then they would be able to go through the network of partners. But someone who's much smarter than me said, why don't we have 25 ways into the conversation? And we all know what each other do. So I took that lesson years ago in the website development world of allowing a lot of attractive, interesting, engaging ways for your audience to become a prospect and get the product they need at the end, being a real estate offering. But I would think about your current website. Are there journeys depending on the different type of prospects you have? And if there aren't, certainly reach out to a partner to help you with that process.
Yeah, and there's a lot of good partners out there, so finding one is probably the first step.
Yeah.
Um, Amazing.
But
Well,
Well,
Delilah, I'm sure we've had a couple questions come in. Is there anything in particular that stands out to you, or obviously Jack, Vicky? David and I are ready.
yeah. And if anyone wants to, unmute themselves and ask their own question, please feel free to do so. Um, for us, let me check in this. One question that we have is, what are the biggest mistakes you see communities make at the awareness stage? If either of you want to start with that.
I think going back to the not digging deep enough into your value proposition. I think if you if you go through websites, as Matt said at the beginning, he's looked at thousands. I've looked at hundreds at least. Or if you go through economic development publications, everyone is talking about those same 5 to 8 ingredients, and they're doing it at a very superficial level. Again, it's going to be strategic location, pro business, low cost workforce, great quality of life. Uh, but I don't think enough communities go that second, third level. Like what makes it a strategic location? Is it because it's a triple rail served site and it's on a river and it has a certain tax abatement? Or is it a great place for education because there's a leading STEM teacher that's the first person to go to college in that person's family and they're looking to improve the world? Like I want to go like the second, third, fourth, fifth layer on information. So I think where communities miss an opportunity is not just going a little bit deeper to understand what is the true value proposition. Catherine here is in Kilgore, Texas. Um, she has an amazing business park, Synergy Park. Like there's been prospects across the world that have come to it thinking it was a golf course, that it's like this most amazing, beautiful, amenity-rich business park that is a great final sell after the prospect's gotten great service from Catherine and from Lisa and the broader team. Synergy Park is, just an incredible. I didn't see your question specifically. I saw your name come off, Catherine. But, Catherine has a great value proposition there that other Texas EDOs could be talking about business parks. But if you saw Synergy Park, you'd be like, that is like, I want to be there every day as a company. What was Catherine's question? It popped up and disappeared kind of fast.
Yeah, so Catherine is with KEDC, and she asked, do you have an example of excellent differentiation versus the same points everyone else is making?
Well, this is probably the worst answer ever, but I think the approach that Marketing Alliance takes, I'm not going to sell us hard, but I think we're passionate about scraping a little bit deeper. And Catherine, I'd be happy to look at the best of our best sites and send those to you where we just went a little bit further. In addition to going further generally, we went even a little bit further in telling that story. We're working on a website now for Washington County, Georgia, that'll launch later this summer. And we've put forth a budget probably 5 times what we've done in the past on an overview video, knowing that our client uses the overview video. It plays all day in the boardroom. Like if he has a prospect in, he plays this overview video. And that overview video is what he uses to win and close deals. So we've invested a ton of time and energy to find those company leaders, those education professionals, those servant leaders, those electeds to be able to tell the story that's going to be much more authentic and deep and, uh, I guess, persuasive at the end of the day than if we were there on a smaller budget and a smaller time frame. But Catherine, I'll follow up with specific examples of sites that I think are really strong in our portfolio.
Awesome. Thank you, David. And additionally, Matt, you will probably have a good answer to this question. But Paula, who's online with us, she said, I understand that these tactics and strategies kind of apply to connecting via a website, but should these rules apply to printed marketing materials or community profiles for the events we attend, or even the digital version of specific brochures? What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, once again, going back to one of the earlier slides that says, you got somebody at the front door. A lot of those print materials are getting somebody to the front door. It's that initial stage of prospecting to put yourself out there, make people know that, hey, I'm visible, I'm here, I'm a thing, and drive that traffic back to the website, which then is going to do a little bit of a deeper dive. So, one of the things I think we've seen, and we've done it ourselves, and I've witnessed just from looking at a lot of print material, is overcomplicating things, right? How can it be simple, straightforward, and get somebody's attention and drive them where you want to drive them? So keeping it simple really is one of the mottos we try to live by. But I think something there as well that absolutely this applies to digital marketing, print marketing, old school, any way you want to do it. It's a stepping stone. And so I would also recommend folks understand where that stone is in the steps. Is it in the beginning or is it in the end? Because what you're going to try to put out there or the approach you're going to try to take is going to vary based off where that is in the process of getting that prospect, building that awareness, making them intrigued as well.
Yeah, I'll add to that. I think our audiences, our collective audiences of everyone on this call, if we're thinking about from a business recruitment standpoint and the type of business leaders and site selectors that your value proposition will resonate with, I think it's a very small audience compared to traditional marketing. It's not hundreds of thousands, it's probably not even thousands, it's probably 800 points of contact. So if we think about it that way, and I was thinking about this presentation, if we talk about prospecting outside of websites, I think our slides would be visually the most boring thing ever because what you would be doing is looking at certain triggers that your value proposition is going to be able to leverage. So depending on where you are in the United States, I'm going to use Nevada, for example. We were working on a lead generation campaign for Nevada. So Nevada has its own value proposition, but being next to California, their value proposition is even stronger. So Nevada was seen as one of the top places for doing business from an ease of business tax environment. California was like one of the worst. It was like green Nevada, red California. Also, the Northeast was in a inferior position compared to Nevada. So what we did and what you could do in this audience is think about who are those companies by industry type, by size, by location that are most primed, I guess, or most able to move to your jurisdiction. So you're going to think about places that have a higher regulatory environment. So it's going to be easier to do business. It's going to be a lower cost of business. It's going to be a place where people are physically constrained. Maybe they've got longer commutes. It's kind of like, in a way, it's dating, you know? It's like, how do I win someone over by identifying who's got it worse? And then how do I position myself that I've got the 8 or 10 things that you need to be successful? Added to that, you could look at your industry strengths and look in your industry and see what companies are growing. Look at who's posting the most jobs on Indeed, knowing that they're growing there. Who's received venture capital recently? Do a map of logistics and see who would benefit from a warehouse or distribution center in between a longer haul. We had a guy, great guy in West Texas. He sat outside of our business park on the interstate and he wrote down the names of the trucks that drove by and saw where the distribution centers were and calculated that if they had a location in our community, that would save them X amount of money. So the prospecting side outside of websites, for digital marketing or direct mail or for phone outreach is really a lot of strategy and thinking about what is it that you have as a community and if it's good, bad, or otherwise, who's got it worse and how can you make that an easy expansion opportunity for them?
Yeah, thank you, David. And kind of on the same topic of strategy, but more kind of on specificity versus just kind of getting people into the door. Henry, also from the audience, asked, do you have thoughts on including a complete inventory of commercial properties versus a sampling or select number of showcased properties? And I'm imagining that he's thinking about the website for this.
Yeah. So going back to who's your prospect, I think that's the first thing you've got to define with anything. Knowing who your prospect is, we see city economic development folks a little bit more interested in everything because they do retail from office to industrial. Any business going to their community is good. You'll see states or utilities that are typically more focused on large projects, job creation projects. So that's typically going to be industrial for the most part. So industrial land might be their focus. So I think once you better understand your prospect and who you're trying to go after, you can adjust your site or your database when it comes to real estate around that. And David and Marketing Alliance do a really great job of having a featured page as well as a holistic sites and building search. So I would highly recommend to anyone, regardless, you know what your top sites are, you know the sites that you're submitting to most of your RFIs. I certainly would recommend having a specific place where you can maybe highlight those. Uh, Even in our application, you can highlight featured properties above other properties. But even to the Marketing Alliance sense of having a separate tab or a separate web page about your specific featured sites would be highly recommended. It doesn't have to be 10, it could be two, it could be five, it could be one. But just taking the time to highlight that, I think, goes a long way. And then I'd also say, I think when it comes to showing everything, a lot of folks are surprised by how much traction some of the asset classes that they haven't focused as much on do get. So I'm going to say retail, because retail seems to be one of the biggest things where over the past 5 years in this industry, I've seen a lot more attention on retail from economic developers. I've seen a lot of economic developers at retail trade shows trying to recruit certain brands, certain industries to their market. So, you know, certainly what are some of your best sites, so highlight those. But also just think about if we can provide this as a resource, you might be surprised at times on who finds value. A lot of our folks are surprised by how much activity they get on retail specifically. I'd say that's one of the most ones that catches people's eyes.
Matt, what's your philosophy? I think if I'm reading the minds of the people on this call, they want to know should the real estate listing, should that database, should that allow someone to kind of self-serve and then reach out to the developer or the realtor, or should that person reach out to me, the EDO leader? Like, what's your thought on should the website be built or the database be built so the EDO leader is kind of hands off and you hope that they come back to the EDO for services, or is it better to have some call to action there where that person might say, "Hey, I'm looking at properties, but I also want to talk to you, EDO person, to help me with incentives and workforce." And what's that contact look like in your best practices thoughts?
Yeah. So we have the option to add economic development contact and a broker contact. Broker is required. Economic development is if they choose to. Most of our folks are starting to lean towards including both. And I'd say there's a difference between the two, right? The broker is going to be a property expert. He's going to know his listing probably better than you. You're a community expert as an economic developer. So the great thing about that is you're a little bit more of an unbiased opinion. So a broker is inclined to sell his property and promote his properties, whereas as a community, your focus is what is the best property, if there is one, for this specific business in our community. So I think having both is crucial. Sometimes, we've heard people mention not like really wanting to drive phone calls to them and not the agents at times or vice versa. And I think the thought is folks are going to do whatever they see fit. So having both options and providing folks both options has seemed to have a lot of success. And at the end of the day, if they're coming to your website to find the sites and buildings, they're going to involve you. Nobody's going to an economic development website just to find a listing and never call, the local community. I would find that highly unlikely, and a lot of our feedback has shown otherwise. So you should
What
have both
about
options out there.
what are your thoughts, Matt, on communities that have what I'd call pocket listings, that they've got land available, but it's not necessarily on the market yet, but they know the owner would be friendly to sell it, or it might be a county or city property that for the right deal, it would happen. Like, does that come across your desk often? Like how an EDO person might be able to say, essentially, we also have some other opportunities. Get in touch with us if you don't see what you want or what you need here.
Yeah. Well, I think it all depends on the interest of the property owner. And so it could be a private entity or it could be a public entity who owns that property. As you mentioned, it could be city owned or county owned, and we really want it to go to a specific use case, or it could be a property owner where, hey, for the right price, everything's for sale. The first step there is understanding what they want. So just because they give you a green light that they're open to interest doesn't mean they maybe want you to publicly blast it everywhere. So there's some consideration on, the specific instance and what you're trying to do with it. But yeah, having specific, maybe on your featured sites page where it's a little bit more nuanced, either
Okay.
giving some basic details about a property and not including the address and call for more information, or hey, we have a handful of specific sites that are quote unquote pocket listings, or we've got some secret sauce that we've hidden away. Give us a shout and we'd love to fill you in on those. We can't necessarily make it fully public. There's a lot of different ways you could go. I'd say the biggest thing is speaking with either your leadership on how you want to market properties that you may own and or market properties that you've gotten that green light from the owner. But once again, do they want a ton of interest or do they really want you to only bring them high quality or specific prospects?
Awesome.
Yeah, that is great. Thank you guys so much. As we approach an hour, I just do want to make sure that we have time to kind of go over our future episodes coming up. So we already went through our Q&A. Thank you guys so much. Is there anything else that you, Matthew, or David would like to add to kind of conclude your thoughts on this conversation today?
It's the beginning of a process. So, know your prospect, I think is the step one, and try to make your information as easily accessible as possible, and even your website.
Yeah, I come back. I use analogies. I think when they say you're not intelligent, you use analogies or metaphors. But I always say economic development is raising the child you have. So all everybody who's representing a community on this call has what I'd say is your child, right? It is what it is. You should be aspirational in the child's growth. But you should embrace who you are, find your point of difference, celebrate your point of difference. As I said on a previous seminar in weeks last week before, as authentic as you can be, as real and as human as you can be. There's gonna be a time and place for data and real estate, and that's a little bit later in the journey. It's 30 seconds later, it's 45 seconds later in the journey. But at the very beginning, I want to know as a prospect what makes your community unique. And there's a lot of challenged places across the United States. There's a lot of underdogs. I mean, I would think 80% of communities in the United States are underdogs in some way, but they all have something that makes them unique and endearing and comfortable and positive. So I would say find what your value proposition is. Don't sell yourself short. Be aspirational, be realistic, and own your authenticity.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you for that to the both of you. Deeply appreciated. So that brings us to the end of this webinar for stage one for prospecting and awareness. So coming up next, I want everybody to be on the lookout for our next stage two, which is product. And in this specific webinar that we just did today, our stage one kind of focused, like both David and Matthew have said, simply just getting on the radar. But obviously, visibility alone, that doesn't just land you projects, I mean. So once you have that attention, stage two is kind of about showing how you have that real investor ready product in your community. So this is kind of where the accurate inventory from Resimplify meets really sharp positioning and packaging that Marketing Alliance specializes in, so that your community, it isn't just seen by potential investors, but it's clearly understood and it's preferred. So that is our stage two coming up. So please stay tuned. These are some of our tentative release dates. Obviously, we had our first episode today in January. Thank you again for coming. And our next episode for product, that should be in about late February. We're aiming for late February and maybe needing to push to early March, but always be on the lookout on both of our LinkedIn pages, company pages, and Matthew and David's pages to be aware of this upcoming stage two. So yes, thank you to everybody again for attending, and a special thank you to Matthew and David for putting together a lot of this content, initiating this conversation, sharing your expertise on this topic. And you can obviously contact both teams at resimplify.com and marketingalliance.com. And both of their LinkedIns are attached there as well. So thank you everybody for joining, and I hope you have a great rest of your evening.